In a cramped apartment in a working-class neighborhood of Chicago, dim morning light filtered through worn-out curtains, casting shadows that mirrored the struggles of its occupants. Sophia Carter, a single mother, opened her eyes to the relentless buzz of her alarm clock. Her body ached from another exhausting day at work, her muscles protesting every movement. But the thought of leaving Lily unsupported pushed her forward. Rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. Sophia made her way to the small kitchen, where the pantry held only a few slices of bread, their edges slightly stale, and a carton of milk, its expiration date drawing near. Sophia hesitated before pouring it, silently praying it hadn't spoiled yet. She carefully prepared a simple breakfast for her daughter Lily. At 8 years old, Lily was a bundle of energy, her bright eyes and innocent smile a constant reminder of why Sophia kept pushing forward. "Mom, today I'm going to draw a picture of a flying unicorn," Lily exclaimed with excitement as she sat at the table, swinging her legs back and forth. Sophia smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from Lily's face. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, but first we need to get ready for school." As Lily dashed off to grab her coat, Sophia's gaze fell on the stack of medical bills sitting on the counter. Lily had endured years of severe asthma, leading to sleepless nights for both mother and daughter. Though her condition had stabilized, the medical bills from those difficult years remained like a shadow over Emily's life. A flicker of worry crossed her face, but she quickly pushed it aside. "I can't give up," she thought. "I have to keep going, for her." Despite the weight of her circumstances, Sophia's determination remained unshaken. What she didn't know was that an unexpected opportunity was about to enter her life, one that would not only change her fate, but also help mend a broken soul in ways she could never have imagined. Sophia pulled her coat tighter against the biting winter wind as she walked Lily to school. The frigid air stung her face, but she kept smiling for Lily's sake. "Make sure you keep your scarf on, sweetheart," she reminded her daughter as they reached the school gates. "Okay, Mom, I'll see you later," Lily waved cheerfully before darting inside, her small frame quickly disappearing among the other children. Sophia watched until Lily was out of sight, then turned toward the clinic where she worked as a nursing assistant. The thought of another long, grueling shift loomed over her, but she pressed on. At the clinic, her day was a blur of endless patients, piles of paperwork, and the persistent nagging of financial stress. During her lunch break, her phone buzzed, a sharp reminder of the overdue rent. Sophia sighed as she read the landlord's text. "Rent is 3 weeks late, Ms. Carter. If I don't see payment soon, we'll have to discuss next steps." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Giving up wasn't an option. That's when Maria, her closest friend and co-worker, sat down beside her. "Sophia, I might have something for you," Maria began cautiously. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Something? That sounds ominous." Maria leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper, her brows furrowing slightly as if reluctant to share the opportunity. "It's a private care position. Daniel Hayes, he's a former tech CEO. He's paralyzed and needs full-time assistance. But he's not the easiest person to work for." Sophia hesitated. "Private care? Maria, you know I've never done anything like that before." Maria waved her hand dismissively. "You've got the skills. And, Sophia, the pay is triple what you're making here." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Triple her current income could mean clearing the medical bills and catching up on rent. It could mean a better life for Lily. But doubts gnawed at her. "Why hasn't anyone stayed long in the job?" she asked. Maria's expression turned serious. "He's difficult, but I know you can handle it. You've been through worse." Sophia stared at the floor for a moment before looking back at Maria. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Later that night, as she tucked Lily into bed, she noticed one of her daughter's drawings on the nightstand, a picture of a happy family standing in a field of flowers. The crayon strokes were uneven but full of love, a glimpse of the future Lily dreamed of. Sophia gently picked it up, her fingers tracing the lines, feeling both a pang of guilt and a surge of determination. "For her, I have to try," she whispered. Sophia gently picked it up, her fingers tracing the crayon strokes. She whispered to herself, "For her, I have to try." The next morning, Sophia called Maria. "I'll do it. Let me know where to apply." Sophia arrived at Hayes Manor feeling both nervous and determined. The grand estate loomed before her, its towering gates and sprawling grounds a stark contrast to her modest apartment in the city. The mansion's exterior was beautiful but cold, its grandeur overshadowed by an eerie stillness that seemed to echo the life of its owner. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by Margaret, a stern-looking woman in her late 50s. Margaret's sharp eyes seemed to assess Sophia in a single glance, taking note of her modest attire and the slightly nervous way she clutched her bag. "Mr. Hayes is a private man," Margaret began curtly. "He doesn't trust easily, and he won't tolerate incompetence. If you're here for charity, you've come to the wrong place." Sophia swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand. I'm here to work and do my best." Margaret didn't reply, but motioned for Sophia to follow her down a long hallway. The mansion's interior was just as grand as its exterior. Polished floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls adorned with expensive artwork. Yet, there was a lifelessness about it, as if the house itself mourned the vibrancy it once held. When they entered the study, Sophia's breath caught. Sitting in a wheelchair by the fireplace was Daniel Hayes. His dark eyes were sharp and guarded, his posture commanding despite his physical state. His presence filled the room, radiating an air of power and bitterness in equal measure. "So," Daniel began, his voice low and clipped, "you're the latest candidate Margaret has dug up. Why should I believe you'll last longer than the others?" Sophia took a steadying breath, meeting his gaze. "Because I'm not here just for the job. I'm here for my daughter. I know what it means to care for someone and to need help. I'm not perfect, but I'm committed." Daniel's expression didn't soften, but he leaned back slightly in his chair, as if weighing her words. "I've heard promises before," he said dryly, "and I've been disappointed every time." Sophia's resolve didn't waver. "Then let me prove myself." For a long moment the room was silent. Finally, Henry gave a faint nod. "Fine, you're hired, but don't expect this to be easy." Margaret stepped forward, ready to usher Sophia out, but Sophia hesitated. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice firm but cautious. Daniel raised an eyebrow, a hint of impatience flickering across his face. "What is it?" "I have an 8-year-old daughter, Lily," Sophia explained. "She's my world. This job would require me to live here full-time, so I would need to bring her with me." The room fell silent. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he studied her. "A child?" he repeated, his tone incredulous. "This is a professional environment. I don't need distractions, and I certainly don't need a child running around causing chaos." Sophia squared her shoulders, refusing to back down. "Lily is well behaved, and she won't disrupt your routine, but I can't leave her alone for long periods. If you give me this chance, I promise it won't interfere with my work." For a moment Daniel didn't respond. Then, with a sigh, he relented. "Fine, but understand this. If she becomes a problem, you and your daughter will both be out of here. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. As Margaret escorted her out, Sophia felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She had the job, but the real challenge was only beginning. Sophia's first days at Hayes Manor were as challenging as she had anticipated, if not more. The grandeur of the estate did little to hide the frigid atmosphere that seemed to emanate from its owner, Daniel Hayes. From the moment she arrived, it was clear that her every move would be scrutinized. Daniel was unyielding in his expectations, and his temper flared over the smallest mistakes. On her second day, she accidentally spilled a glass of water while adjusting his wheelchair. "Are you trying to make things worse, or is incompetence just your default setting?" Daniel snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Sophia clenched her jaw but refused to react. "I'll clean it up," she replied calmly, reaching for a towel. She reminded herself that she was here for Lily, and that walking away wasn't an option. Margaret, Daniel's ever-watchful assistant was no less critical. Her sharp gaze followed Sophia throughout the day, ready to pounce on any perceived misstep. "You're lucky Mr. Hayes is patient today," Margaret muttered at one point, though her tone made it clear she believed otherwise. Despite the tension, Lily's presence brought a rare sense of warmth to the cold manor. The little girl's wide eyes sparkled as she explored the vast halls, marveling at the chandeliers in the enormous library. Her laughter, though soft, was like sunlight breaking through the heavy clouds of the house. But Lily's natural curiosity soon led her to Daniel's study. One afternoon, Sophia returned from an errand to find her daughter perched on a chair beside him, her legs swinging as she spoke. "Does it hurt not being able to walk?" Lily asked, her voice innocent and sincere. Daniel stiffened, his sharp gaze fixing on the child. "What makes you think you can ask me something like that?" he retorted, his tone clipped and cold. Lily tilted her head, undeterred. "Mom says people don't always say how they feel, so I thought I'd ask." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, to Sophia's surprise, Daniel let out a low sound that was somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack in the icy wall he had built around himself. That evening, as Sophia passed by Daniel's study, she noticed the door slightly ajar. Curious, she peeked inside and saw him staring at a framed photo on his desk. The picture showed a smiling woman and a young girl, their happiness frozen in time. "They look beautiful," Sophia said softly, unable to stop herself. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. Without a word, he turned the frame face down on the desk. "Don't presume to talk about them," he said, his voice low and strained. Sophia nodded and stepped back, respecting the unspoken boundaries. Yet, as she walked away, she couldn't shake the image of his pain. Beneath his cold exterior was a man carrying a deep and unhealed wound, and she couldn't help but wonder if it could ever truly heal. It was late afternoon when Sophia approached Daniel with a bold suggestion. She had noticed a neglected garden on the estate's grounds during her walks with Lily, a once beautiful space overgrown with weeds and shadows of what it used to be. "Mr. Hayes," she began hesitantly, standing in the doorway of his study, "I think it would do you some good to get outside for a bit." Daniel didn't even look up from the book he was pretending to read. "I'm perfectly fine where I am, thank you." Sophia took a deep breath. "I saw the garden earlier. It looks like it used to be beautiful. Maybe some fresh air." "It was my wife's," Daniel interrupted, his voice clipped. He finally looked up, his eyes cold but laced with something deeper. "And it hasn't been touched since she passed. I don't see the point in dragging up the past." Sophia hesitated but pressed on gently. "Sometimes bringing something back to life can help us move forward." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, to her surprise, he relented with a begrudging sigh. "Fine, but don't expect me to enjoy it." Later that afternoon, Sophia wheeled Daniel out to the garden with Lily skipping ahead, her laughter ringing through the quiet estate. The once vibrant space was now a tangle of weeds, dry soil, and broken flower beds. But Lily's face lit up as though she saw a secret beauty no one else could. "This place is amazing," Lily exclaimed, spinning around with her arms wide open. She knelt beside a patch of soil, scooping up a handful and letting it fall through her fingers. "We could plant flowers here. It'll be so pretty." Daniel watched her silently, his face unreadable. But as Sophia glanced at him, she noticed the faintest softening in his expression, as if Lily's enthusiasm had pierced the armor he wore so tightly. "It used to be her favorite place," Daniel said quietly, almost to himself. His gaze drifted to a crumbling stone bench near the center of the garden. She would spend hours out here, planting, tending, dreaming. Sophia placed a hand on the back of his wheelchair. "We could honor her memory by bringing it back to life." Lily beamed, jumping to her feet. "Can we, Mr. Hayes? Please? I'll help." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line as he considered the request. Finally, with a nod, he said, "All right. But don't think for a second this is about me. This is for her." Sophia smiled, sensing that this small concession was the first step toward something greater. Over the following days, the garden became a project for all three of them. Lily's boundless energy and imagination breathed new life into the space, while Sophia worked diligently to clear away the overgrowth. Daniel, though limited in what he could do physically, began to offer suggestions, his voice carrying a trace of the passion he once had. The garden, much like its reluctant caretaker, was slowly beginning to heal. The days at Hayes Manor began to take on a new rhythm. The garden project had become more than just an effort to revive a neglected space. It was a catalyst for change, drawing the three of them closer in unexpected ways. Lily, as always, was at the heart of it. She had an uncanny ability to light up even the darkest corners of Daniel's guarded demeanor. Each day, she would come bounding into the study with stories of her school adventures or fantastical ideas for the garden. "Mr. Hayes," she chirped one afternoon, clutching a handful of colorful seed packets. "If we plant these, butterflies will come. Mom says they're like little flying rainbows." Daniel raised an eyebrow but couldn't suppress the faintest twitch of a smile. "Flying rainbows, you say? That's imaginative." Lily grinned, undeterred by his dry tone. "You'll see. When they come, you'll like them too." Sophia watched these exchanges with a mix of amazement and gratitude. Lily's innocence and optimism had managed to do what she alone couldn't: break through Daniel's icy exterior. Sophia also began to notice subtle changes in Daniel. Though he still barked instructions and pointed out her mistakes, there was a new edge of patience in his voice. During his physical therapy sessions, he no longer resisted as much, even when the exercises were difficult. One day, after a particularly grueling session, Daniel surprised Sophia by saying, "You're not as hopeless at this as I thought." Sophia smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It's not," he replied, though the faintest hint of a smile betrayed his words. Lily, of course, had her own way of motivating Daniel. During one of his therapy sessions, she plopped down on the floor beside him, her chin resting on her hands. "Mr. Hayes," she said matter-of-factly, "I think you could walk again if you tried hard enough. You're just like one of those superheroes in my books, the ones who don't give up." Daniel glanced at her, his face unreadable. "Superheroes don't end up in wheelchairs," he replied. "Maybe not," Lily said thoughtfully, "but if they did, they'd find a way to be super again." Her words lingered long after the session ended. That evening, as Daniel sat alone in his study, he found himself looking down at his legs and wondering if, perhaps, she was right. The progress wasn't just physical, it was emotional. One evening, as the three of them worked in the garden, Daniel began to share a story about his wife. "She loved tulips," he said, his voice quiet but tinged with longing. "Every spring, she'd plant hundreds of them, turning the garden into a sea of colors. She used to say they were proof that even after the harshest winters, life could bloom again. I didn't believe her then, but now..." Lily listened intently, her wide eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "We'll plant tulips, Mr. Hayes. Lots of them," she promised. For the first time, Daniel didn't dismiss her enthusiasm. Instead, he nodded and murmured, "That would be nice." As the garden flourished under their combined efforts, so did the fragile bonds between them. Sophia began to see glimpses of the man Daniel might have been before tragedy struck, a man capable of kindness, humor, and even hope. And for Daniel, each step forward, both literal and metaphorical, felt like a small victory against the darkness that had consumed him for so long. Daniel's recovery journey was anything but easy. Each session of physical therapy pushed him to his limits, testing his patience and resolve. Yet, with Sophia's steady encouragement and Lily's boundless belief in him, he began to make small strides. The sessions were grueling, filled with sweat, frustration, and more than a few harsh words. On some days, Daniel would glare at the therapist, his jaw tight as he forced his body to obey commands it had long forgotten. "This is pointless," he muttered one morning, his voice shaking with frustration as his trembling hands gripped the wheelchair's arms. "I'll never walk again. What's the use? It's a waste of time and effort." Sophia knelt beside him, her gaze unwavering. "It's not pointless," she said firmly. Every small step forward matters. You've come so far already." Daniel looked away, unwilling to let her see the doubt in his eyes. But deep down, her words resonated. Lily, as always, was his greatest motivator. She often sat nearby during therapy, her big eyes filled with encouragement. "Mr. Hayes," she piped up one afternoon, "did you know that superheroes don't give up?" Daniel chuckled dryly. "You've mentioned that before, Lily." "Well, it's true," she insisted, crossing her arms. "And you're my superhero, so you have to keep trying." Her declaration left him speechless. Though he didn't say it, her unwavering faith in him was a light he hadn't realized he needed. Weeks of effort turned into months, and progress came in small but steady increments. First, his toes began to wiggle. Then, with assistance, he could bear weight on his legs for a few seconds. And then, one afternoon, the impossible happened. Sophia and the therapist helped Daniel stand during a session in the sunny corner of the library. His legs wobbled beneath him, but he held on. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his breaths came short and fast. "Just one step," Sophia urged gently. "You can do this." Daniel clenched his jaw, his knuckles white as he gripped the parallel bars. Slowly, shakily, he moved his right foot forward. The first step in years. Lily, who had been watching intently, let out a delighted squeal. "He did it! Mom, he did it!" Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she whispered, "Yes, he did." Daniel's face was a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he had thought was lost forever. Hope. That evening, the three of them gathered in the garden. Lily danced among the newly planted tulips, her laughter ringing through the air. Sophia brought out a tray of lemonade, her smile radiant with pride. "You're stronger than you think," Sophia said softly as she handed Daniel a glass. Daniel didn't reply immediately, his gaze fixed on Lily as she twirled among the flowers. Finally, he said, "Maybe I'm starting to believe that." The garden, once overrun with weeds, was now blooming with life. Much like Daniel himself, it was a testament to the power of perseverance, hope, and the healing touch of human connection. The transformation at Hayes Manor was nothing short of remarkable. The once called estate now radiated warmth and life, much like the people within it. Daniel Hayes had not only begun walking again, but had also started to reclaim the parts of himself he thought were lost forever. Each day, Daniel grew stronger. He now took short walks around the garden, his steps slow but steady. The tulips that Lily had promised to plant stood tall and vibrant, a living testament to the hope they had nurtured together. One afternoon, as they strolled through the garden, Daniel turned to Sophia. "Do you remember the designs I worked on years ago? The wheelchair prototypes?" Sophia nodded. "Of course. Margaret mentioned them once. She said they were ahead of their time." Daniel smiled faintly. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time to finish what I started. If these designs can help others regain their independence, maybe they can mean something more than just an old project." Sophia's heart swelled with pride. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You have so much to offer, Daniel." With Daniel's recovery, Sophia's life had also changed dramatically. The financial struggles that had weighed so heavily on her were now a distant memory. For the first time in years, she could focus on being present for Lily rather than merely surviving. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Lily leaned against her mother's arm. "Mom, do you think Mr. Hayes is happy now?" Sophia smiled, her gaze drifting to Daniel, who was standing by the tulips, lost in thought. "I think he's learning to be," she replied. "And that's a big step." Despite the changes, one thing remained constant: the bond the three of them had formed. They were no longer just caregiver and patient, or neighbors under the same roof. They were a family. One day, Daniel approached Sophia with an unexpected request. "I'd like you to stay on," he said, his tone unusually gentle. "Not because I need your help anymore, but because this place feels different with you and Lily here. It feels alive." Sophia blinked back tears. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You're not just my caregiver, Sophia. You're family now," Daniel said, his voice unusually soft. For a moment, Sophia was stunned, her breath hitching as tears brimmed in her eyes. She managed a small smile, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more than you know." The story ended as it began, in the garden. But this time, the air was filled with laughter and warmth. Daniel, leaning on a cane, walked slowly beside Sophia as Lily darted ahead, her laughter echoing through the blooming flowers. The camera lingered on the tulips, swaying gently in the breeze, a symbol of resilience, growth, and new beginnings. Sophia glanced at Daniel, and for the first time, she saw not the bitterness or pain that had once defined him, but a man who had rediscovered his purpose. "See?" Lily called out, turning to look at them. "I told you we could make this place beautiful again." "You were right," Daniel replied, his voice full of emotion. "You were right about everything." As they walked forward together, the garden seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the hope and love that now defined their lives. It was a new chapter for all of them, filled with promise, healing, and a bond that would never break.